All right. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see kind of a new group of faces tonight. We're really excited about our second session for the Ward 3 vacancy public meet and greet. So just to kind of lay some ground rules, both for our applicants and then for the public. The intent of tonight is solely to ask questions of these four individuals in front of us today. It is not a debate, so they will not be rebutting each other's responses. They won't actually be even talking about each other's responses. It's just an opportunity for them to answer the questions that we have compiled as an organization based on some of the questions that were submitted through our form on the Reno.gov website. There was a session last night. It has not yet been published and put on the website. So once I have both of these recordings, I'll go ahead and put both of them up. So if you missed yesterday's, you can play catch up and watch them over the weekend. And then they'll both be on YouTube as well. So everybody should be able to access them in one place or another. Disco party in here. I love it. All right. So we do have 5 questions tonight that we have compiled based off of the responses that we received from the public. They are different than they were last night. So for those participating, you will have a whole new opportunity to challenge yourself with a whole new set of parameters and questions, which is awesome. We'll give you we'll go with a 3-minute introduction and then 2 minutes per question. Okay. And then additionally at the end, we'll just do the same thing as last night, where we will do a 1-minute closing comments for whatever last minute statements you would like to make to the public. And then for the public, what we'll do is the first hour of this is intended to be the question and answer session. So I have pre-curated questions. I will ask those, and then we will close out that first hour. And then these 4 individuals will get up and mingle around the room. So if there are questions that you have that I wasn't able to ask tonight, that's your opportunity to go ahead and engage with them one-on-one individually to really get those burning questions that I wasn't able to cover answered. Good? Thumbs up. All right, and I think I've already confirmed that everybody in the Zoom meeting can hear us loud and clear by a raise of hand. And so with that, I'm going to scooch out of the picture, let you all start your introductions. All right, and Courtney, since I'm closest to you tonight, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
All right, I was in the middle last night, so I had to take it in.
All right.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. Thank you for submitting questions, and I look forward to the discussion we're going to have this evening. My name is Courtney McKimmey. I'm a native Nevadan, armor officer in the Nevada Army National Guard, and proud queer woman here in Reno. Growing up, I played a lot of club sports and spent many nights traveling to Reno and enjoying our public parks and recreational opportunities here. And just in that short period of time, it's pretty remarkable how much our city has changed. But I'm also pretty amazed by how much I've been able to accomplish in just the 8 years since I moved to Reno to attend the University of Nevada, Reno. As a dual graduate of the university and former senior policy director to Lieutenant Governor Pete Marshall, I feel that my experience is unique, and it's really been because of the support and investment this community has made in me. And that's why I decided to put my name forward for this process. I believe that as a public servant, you have the opportunity to wake up every morning and make a difference in people's lives. But you also have the obligation every day to ask yourself, what more can I be doing? And that second question, what more can I be doing, really inspired me to take a good look in the mirror and think, what can I do for my community? And it's what inspired me during the height of the pandemic to start a food delivery program that served over 70,000 meals to our high-risk residents across the region. And it's also what inspired me to put my name forward for this process. So I look forward to talking about my top priorities. You know, I want to make Ward 3 in the city of Reno a place where everyone can thrive and have an opportunity to get ahead. So thank you again for being here tonight.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thanks to all those who are online and meeting with us virtually. Thanks to the staff, thanks to the city council for making this opportunity possible for me and for my colleagues here on the panel. My name is Sean Savoy. As I mentioned, I am a native Renoite. I was born here 50 years ago in Washoe Med, now known as renowned Reno Medical Center. And I'm the son of a World War II veteran, Great Depression era father and a mother from Latin America. So I'm the son of an immigrant and first generation on my mother's side. I speak both English and Spanish. My mother's from Peru, Lima, Peru. That I'm very proud of. So we come from a mixed bag of ethnicities. I have spent my entire professional career here, over 35 years in Reno, committed to the community. And I've done that in various ways with civil rights and social action, human rights. I'm very proud of the fact that I proposed Human Rights Commission be formed for the city of Reno, the first of its kind, which was championed by the city council, by the mayor specifically, and then approved unanimously some years ago, 7 to be exact. And I've served as the chair of that commission, and now I will be rolling off that commission after many years of service. I have spent other time in my life advocating for marginalized communities, the LGBT+ community, the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community, as we now say. I have spent 35+ years in interfaith dialogue, working with faith communities to bring reconciliation to them, to help them work together, to help them have reasonable dialogue with each other. And I have spent a great deal of time working also with the African American community. I was the chair of the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Committee, and I'm also a founding member of the Latino Research Advisory Board for the University of Nevada, Reno. At this time, I serve on the CHIP Steering Committee, which is the Community Health Improvement Plan for Washington County. And I'm also on the College of Liberal Arts Advisory Board, as well as an advisor for the College of the Honors College of the University of Nevada, Reno, where I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in journalism and Spanish. But my main background actually is in spirituality. And what that means is helping people to heal, helping people on the inside, attending to their emotional needs, their stressors, their fatigue, their moral distress. And I do that at Renowned Health, where I'm proud to call myself the head of spiritual care, where I oversee volunteers and students and staff, spiritual care practitioners, including chaplains, and including our clergy partners throughout the region. So I'm very excited to have this opportunity to expand my commitment to our community in Ward 3, where I live, work, shop, gym, and play. I enjoy our ward. I know we have a lot of work to do to improve it, and I'm looking forward to spending time with the city council and all of you to determine what next steps we can take to make it a better place to live.
Good evening. Buenas tardes a todos. My name is Kyle Edgerton. I was born and raised in Reno, and I began my career running the immigration program at Catholic Charities of Northern Nevada. I'm now an attorney with my own law practice, focused on immigration, criminal defense, and family law. My spouse and I have had a home in the heart of Ward 3 since 2010, and we're raising 2 little boys, and we're proud to call Reno home. I applied for this position because I'm passionate about reaching out to the community, bringing people together and solving problems. That outreach piece is important. You know, we need to have all the voices in the conversation if we're going to make the best decisions possible. And we don't always find them in an outreach setting like this or at a given council meeting on a given Wednesday. And so I think we need to be able to reach out into the community, into people's lives. And I'm committed to doing that and finding out what those challenges are that people face. I also think we need to work on making sure that people understand what the city's business is and how they can give input into it, and how they can make sure to follow up to make sure that input comes to some fruition. So once you have that input, once you have the people at the table, the right people at the table, what do you then do to make those decisions? And that's where my skills as an attorney come in, I think. For starters, you know, the city has limited power. The city has to do what is required by law to do, and the city can't do things that are ultra vires or outside of its authority. And so it's important to understand what those constraints are to be able to educate the public about them, and then, if necessary, to change those constraints. The other thing that I do in my daily work is bringing people together again, but usually not in a positive way, right? We're starting from opposite sides, maybe 3 different sides of an issue, and trying to find what that common ground is to resolve that dispute. I think a lot of people think that the way you do that is you say, okay, well, my client wants 10, your client wants 0, so the answer must be somewhere in the middle, like 5. Instead, the first question I ask is, what are your needs? And the first thing I say is, my client's needs are X, Y, and Z. And that changes the conversation. We're no longer just squabbling over abstract numbers or trying some kind of tug of war where we're beating our chests and trying to win the fight. It becomes more about solving an issue that we share together. We have a shared problem that we're trying to solve. We're actually collaborating and we're actually talking about the things that we care about that are actually animating that decision. That yields better results and sometimes some surprising solutions. So that's some of the skills and perspective I bring to the position of the candidacy. I thank the city for giving me the opportunity to be a finalist. Thankful to the city of Reno for putting on this event, to my fellow finalists for being great, involved people in our community, and thankful to all of you for being here virtually or otherwise, and look forward to the discussion and talking with you after.
So, buenas tardes todos. Hi everyone. How's everyone doing today?
All right.
Awesome. Hopefully you're doing well. I want to start off by thanking the city of Reno staff for making this hybrid event possible. And I want to make sure I highlight that it is a hybrid event because it does make it more accessible to people who aren't able to be here in person and still get the information that they need to support whichever one of us it is that is up here right now. My name is Miguel Martinez. I should introduce myself at the beginning, but I just wanted to say that before I got started. And so I was born and raised in Ward 3. I grew up in a mobile home park off of Kitski near the Philadelphia cheesesteak, which if any of you are familiar with that area, that's kind of where I grew up. I lived there until I was about in 6th grade, and my parents had the opportunity to buy a house and move our family up to the North Valleys. And that's where I was raised. I went to the public K through 16 school system here in Northern Nevada. So I graduated with my associate's degree from Traquimeros Community College. Got my bachelor's in psychology and Spanish from the University of Nevada, Reno. And I have a Master of Arts in Education from Virginia Tech. So I got the chance to go out to the south west part of Virginia and experience a different side of our country. And I grew a big appreciation for my hometown. I mean, I already felt like Reno was home for me, but that strengthened definitely those feelings that I had when I was over there. I definitely missed a lot of the attributes that our city has to offer. And so I applied for the seat because I want to make sure that I serve and I represent the citizens of Ward 3 the best that I can. And similar to all the other applicants, I'm very interested in making sure that I garner the information that I need to make informed decisions and that I meet people where they are at so I can collect that information. And so what I mean by that is making sure that I'm accessible and that my information is out there and I'm responsive to communication. So if I get appointed to the seat, my top 3 priorities would be housing, public safety, and parks and recreation, which I mentioned before, but I just wanted to reiterate that one more time. I want to thank you all for being here, taking the time, and I look forward to the discussions we will have tonight. I also want to briefly share my message in Spanish for the folks that are here in person or online. Soy Miguel Martínez, uno de los finalistas al nombramiento del concejal del Distrito 3 en la ciudad de Reno. Me da orgullo haber sido criado en Reno, Nevada. Esta comunidad me brindó las oportunidades que tengo y quiero ser un buen representante de nuestra comunidad. Gracias. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we're going to have to do a little bit of a text switch here for just a moment. Because we also have a planning commission meeting tonight at 10.
Are we in the planning meeting? They got our interest.
Yeah. Stay timely, we're gonna keep.
What was the issue?
We have 2 meetings trying to run on the same stream at the same time, so we're gonna work on it and then we'll pause as needed. All right. Okay. Okay, so our first question today is, in yesterday's session, each of you mentioned affordable housing as a major issue facing Ward 3 residents. At times, affordable housing and urban development have been in conflict with each other as related to city council priorities. What can the city council do to balance beautification and structural development of neighborhoods without displacement of those communities?
Was that question sent in
Yes.
from the public?
Okay, then we'll go ahead and start at the other end with Miguel.
I'm just gonna read the question one more time. So I think, the question is very thoughtful. I think including the word balance is definitely something that I heard from all of us as applicants, and being able to look at the exact agenda item that is in front of us and the case that is in front of us, and working with the other council members to understand the complexities of the issues that are going on, and balancing the smart growth and the beautification of our area and keeping our neighborhoods and our homeowners and renters in homes is something that we definitely need to be able to balance. And again, that's where I would rely on the outreach and the community involvement to get your input. Obviously, I'm just one citizen of this ward, and so I do want to represent you to the best that I can, but my story isn't the same as everyone else's story. And so making sure that I collect your input is going to be pivotal to me in that process of making a well-informed decision.
Kyle?
Yeah, this is a tough one. You know, there's a couple terms here, and y'all can't see the written question, but there's a couple terms that are doing a lot of work. I think one is beautification is actually in scare quotes, and so, you know, who's beautification, right? I mean, you know, personally, as you know, second generation Renoite, I kind of love classic brick buildings, or kind of, you know, we were talking before the meeting, you know, my dad will still refer to the old Montgomery Ward building, right? Or he'll identify these structures as, you know, they're unrecognizable now. So for me, that history is beautiful, but that's also not kind of, you know, whites and blacks and faux wood, which is kind of the beautification of the moment. So those aesthetic questions, I think, as Miguel pointed out, are going to be something that I think the council is not going to be issuing by fiat, but rather getting input from the community. Another term that's doing a lot of work in this question is displacement of those communities. You know, I think we ran into this with the Jacobs problem, issue. And there's been a lot of pushback about how that shook out. One narrative is that, you know, a lot of the folks that were in those motel units were living in conditions that were untenable and undignified and shouldn't have been allowed to happen. That was one narrative. And then there's also a part of that story this was these people's home, right? This is where they were. And so I think, again, you need to have the stakeholders at the table. You need to be listening for what those needs are. Maybe folks would say, yeah, getting out of this place, it's bed bug ridden, I need out. So I think, as Miguel pointed out, a lot of it is just having a meaningful conversation. The last piece that I'll add with a little bit of substance is, you know, especially in our ward, we're growth constrained, right? And so I think trying to find ways to make infill work and be affordable from a penciling out development standpoint is tricky, but it's a challenge to work through. And there's opportunities there to build in to you know, prorate housing units as workforce or as affordable, right? Those are conversations we need to have. This is a tough question.
Chris? Sorry, Sean?
It's very confusing. I understand. Yes, it is a difficult question. I think one that we all grapple with, and I know the city council has grappled with it for sure over the many years. So there are no easy answers. There is a concept called segregation by design. And what that means is sometimes development comes in with the intention of improving an area, maybe putting on a freeway or putting in a neighborhood or putting in a department store. And what ends up happening is you begin to isolate neighborhoods and you begin to isolate neighbors. And at the end of the day, many times those people who are sacrificed are those who are less fortunate. And so I think we have to be very considerate of the people who may be displaced when we consider development. Of course, the other side of that coin is, if we don't move, if we don't grow, if we don't have progress, will the city ever reach a point where we, have new amenities, new grocery store, new buildings, new markets, etc. So again, as the others have said, conversation is so important, but I think it's also important for the city of Reno to be very proactive as opposed to reactive. What happens is when you're reactive, you can become opportunistic. When you're opportunistic, that means you're taking advantage of an opportunity that comes to you without maybe having thought that through completely. That does not mean, I don't mean to say that the city council has done that. What I'm saying is we don't want to go down that road. And I think we have to have a degree of accountability, which I believe the council would agree with, that when developers come in and they want to rip out entire blocks, but they are not then held accountable, or there's some caveat that's holding them from being accountable to completing their project in the timeline that they have suggested. Now, pandemics aside, financial crises aside, these things have to be taken into consideration, but we must also hold developers accountable while we'll still want to encourage them to come to Reno and be part of our community.
Thank you, Courtney. There's a lot to address in 2 minutes here, so I want to focus on the affordable housing component and how that impacts the potential for displacement of communities. I think right now, the affordable housing crisis is really because we aren't able to build enough housing across all types of housing right now. It's taking almost sometimes 2 years to get developments through the process. And so as a city council person, I'd be really focused on where are those bottlenecks right now that are delaying affordable housing developments from starting to move dirt to having tenants and occupants in those spaces. But when we're talking about beautification and balancing development and beautification of these areas, first and foremost, we need to be doing whatever we possibly can to preserve our historical buildings and our open spaces and parks. I think a great example of preserving our historical buildings is the old post office, which is in the ward right along the river. I worked there as a college student, and what the developers were able to do with that space is quite incredible. And we should be trying to encourage that as much as possible on the front end. However, as Sean pointed out, there are market constrictions as well to how we're able to rehab those buildings. And right now, because of labor, the labor market and supply chain issues caused by the pandemic, sometimes it's cheaper or easier and faster to knock down older buildings. And there's also safety hazards concerned with that. One of the things I'm really focused on are the numerous houses located across the street from the Veterans Hospital that are owned by the VA that have been sitting empty for years now. And I would be really interested in working with our federal partners to rehab those buildings and hopefully get some veteran preference housing in such close proximity to the VA hospital.
I guys are killing it on time today. Visual, my goodness. Okay, question 2. Building trustful relationships takes time, effort, and authenticity. What would your approach be to intentionally connect with communities that are non-traditionally involved? How do you plan to inform those who are less fluent in political processes? And we'll go ahead and start in the middle.
We encounter this issue in all sectors of society, not just government. This happens in large corporations. It happens in families. The first thing is you really must come to the table. You must invite people to the table, which that means is you have to be inclusionary. And to be inclusionary means you have to take the time. You have to put forth the effort to reach past your own comfort zone. It is not enough to say, I have sent a message to, let's say, for example, when we had the COVID pandemic and we want to do a vaccine drive, and we said, well, we sent an email to the Latino community and well, they're not showing up. Well, have you considered access to technology? Have you considered the language you're using to reach those people? Have you learned about their cultural preferences? And are you culturally competent to understand how families work? So it really takes more than just the message. You have to really engage in a process of meaningful and thoughtful engagement. And so for me, I have worked very hard over my career and my personal and professional careers to engage with people. I'm a people person. I like to sit with people, talk with people. I'm old school. If you can't get them by text, pick up the phone. And if you can't pick up the phone, go to them. I think sometimes we get lazy, and I know we're all constrained by time and many responsibilities, but we again, it's the reactive instead of the proactive. We wait for people to come to us instead of going to them. Now, at the same time, by the same token, when you have large groups like cities, there is a responsibility and onus on the citizen to come forward. So I think that's what we can do to help with that, is to make it a welcoming space, open door policy. Let's let people come to us, and let's make it a space for them to come and have conversations.
Thank you. Two terms are kind of sticking in my mind. One is full court press and the other one is door to door. So, full court press, I think if you had a particular event, right, maybe it's this gathering this evening, maybe it's some other kind of high profile event like Sean was mentioning, where you want a lot of bottoms and a lot of seats. You really need to hit every avenue, right? And so, yeah, it's very easy to just kind of send out an email. But if you really wanted people there, right, you would basically brainstorm every possible means of reaching folks, and you would do it. You would do phone trees and text trees, and you do social media, you do print and postcards. I got a postcard the other day for a yard cleanup. So you really do a full court press to try to reach people if you want them. Because again, if the goal is outreach for the purpose of checking a box that we outreach, that's one thing. But if your goal is really to get a broad cross section of folks, you got to think creatively. The other part is door to door. So I've done a fair amount of knocking doors for political campaigns over the years. And what's always struck me is that we talk to folks for maybe a hairy 2-month period twice every 2 years, right? There's the pre-primary season, there's the pre-general season, and then we're ghosts. There's no ongoing relationship there, right? It's just, now I show up, now I knock your door, I try to rate you in terms of your proclivity toward my candidate, and then we're gone. I think a great model to try and, I don't know how easy it is to get people on board for this, but my vision is getting people to organize on a neighbor to neighbor basis, on a door to door basis, and having people as a street, as a block, come together on some regular basis, not for any particular agenda, just to kind of hang out and know each other, have a barbecue, a block party, but that's going to build connective tissue that's then going to be able to grow into policy and political advocacy. If those people have loving community relationships with one another, they're going to be able to disagree and weather those disagreements, and they're going to have a natural network to tap into when there is an issue. There's a four-way stop that needs to go in, or there's a graffiti issue or whatever. There's going to be a touch point for that. So those are two thoughts on the questions.
Yeah, great question. And I think a lot of conversations I've had this week and process here have been really focused on this question. As a young member of the LGBTQ community, as a woman in a combat arms field in the military, there are often a lot of spaces, meetings, events where I feel that I sometimes didn't have a voice, and sometimes thought that if I did speak up or share my opinion, that it wouldn't be valued. And having been someone that's operated in this space for a couple of years now, sometimes I still feel that way. And I would have never gotten involved in public service had someone not personally invited me, coached me, mentored me to feel included in spaces of power. And I think it's important to recognize that as a member of the council, your residents, and I believe, as an appointee to the Ward 3 position, I want all residents of Ward 3 to see me as their neighbor first, not their council person. Because I don't want residents coming to city council meetings just seeing me sitting up there at the dais as someone that they don't feel that they can have a cup of coffee with, or have a friendly conversation and make their voice feel heard and feel seen. So it is that hand out direct approach. It's more than an email, it's more than a text message, it's more than a flyer. It's putting in the hours to make sure that you are personally inviting people to share their opinions, whether they come to public comment or submit public comment online. At least you have that face-to-face interaction. And having been kind of on the other side of the table a lot of the time, I think I have the experience to build that authenticity with folks to invite them into these spaces.
So I like that this question specifically mentions that building relationships takes time. effort and authenticity. And I just want to mention that working in education for the past almost 7 years, I have to be collaborative in the approach that I do and the work that I do to be successful with the students that I hope to inspire to continue their education. So being a planner and a scheduler and being conscious of including different perspectives, that does take time. And so if, as Kyle mentioned, we want to make sure to include everybody. We need to plan that ahead of time, make sure that people are involved in the decision-making process. And that isn't something that's an afterthought or as was mentioned before, something to just check the box off and say that it was completed. The other thing I wanted to mention about this question was the fact that it specifically points to people who are less fluent in political processes. And that's something that I can definitely identify with myself. Because this is the first time that I've ran for any political office. And so or been in the process, I'm not in an appointment process, I should clarify. And so it has taken a lot of work for me to fully understand what the process is, what city council is actually involved in, what the limitations to their power is and how they function and govern and influence our everyday lives. And so going through that process myself fairly recently allows me to be able to take all that information and try to digest it as much as I can and explain it to somebody in language that they can take and understand. And whether that is in their own native language or just using common terms. Yeah.
Okay, question 3. Ward 3 has the largest floodplain in the city of Reno. What ideas or policy changes would you propose to protect existing flood storage in South Reno? And we'll go ahead and start with Kyle.
All right. You know, I'm thinking about the Daybreak, I think it got rebranded as Talus or Mount Talus or something like that. So there's a community that was recently kind of greenlit down in that exact pocket. There was also a big conversation about this when the Southeast Connector was put in, right? Veterans Parkway. And so, you know, I'll be frank, it's not an issue that I am totally dialed in on all the way to the engineering specs. But again, the general approach, right, of bringing forward stakeholders, you know, you're obviously going to get one story from the folks who have a financial interest in developing that area, right? And they're going to have, you know, it needs to pencil out for them. And so they're going to have earnest, important feedback, but they're not necessarily going to bring the whole story, right? Because, you know, we have relatively weak construction defects law in Nevada, right? And so there's a little bit more ability to kind of build something, you know, kind of cash your check and move along. And I think if we have good relationships, and again, there's mutual respect, and it doesn't feel like we're always, you know, kind of caterwauling at each other, there's more opportunity to have frank, needs-based conversations, right, among stakeholders, among, you know, the broader community that doesn't want to live in a floodplain or doesn't want to be flood exposed, the broader community that doesn't want to have to deal with the run-on costs of having to kind of bail out these folks, whether that's bailing them out with water or, you know, in some other figurative sense. And again, the developers have an interest as well. So I think bringing those people to the table and making sure that we're getting good input, both from a financial standpoint, and we're keeping climate change in mind. And we're also just, you know, making sure we have good engineering specs, and maybe from, you know, like with a medical decision, we'll often get, you know, second or third opinions. And so this is probably a situation where that's happened.
So recently moving to Donner Springs made me a little bit more aware of the situation that the residents and some of the businesses that are down in that area are experiencing or in potential of experiencing there. I think I would make sure that we're being proactive in our approach, and similar to what Kyle said, I'm not as dialed in on all the logistics and technicalities of the way the water flow here in our area, but I would work with our regional partners to learn as much as I can and make sure that we're being as efficient as possible with that, and making sure that we have a plan of action in case anything were to happen, and that the citizens And our business owners are aware of what that plan is and how to enact it in case it does come down to that situation coming to fruition, which obviously I think all of us hope will never happen. But there's always that chance. And so again, making sure that the citizens are informed of that and making sure that we be proactive about our approach.
So I mentioned this last night at last night's forum. Regional growth will continue to put stress on our physical infrastructure in addition to our public safety infrastructure and our social infrastructure. And so when we're talking about the continuation of regional growth, those are the things that are front of mind for me. And this question obviously is right at that physical infrastructure part. I believe, you know, in the project that's been referenced by the other applicants, I think our city staff and our engineering experts really did their due diligence and took the time to address the concerns the community had about the project coming online. And I think it's important to also note that climate change will continue to impact our most vulnerable communities, and specifically in Ward 3. And so, you know, we need to be proactive, as you know, this hence or talks about policy changes. We need to be proactive as a city of what we're doing in terms of investment in green infrastructure across the entire region, and what we're doing to be ready and be climate resilient. Having worked in the environmental and renewable energy policy space previously, there's a lot we can do as a city to limit the impact climate change will have on our most vulnerable communities. You know, given the fact that the ward has the airport in the ward as well, we need to be talking about air pollution. We need to be talking about what we can do to streamline our solar permitting processes, and we need to be talking about how we can get electric vehicle infrastructure up and running as well. And so I think, you know, when we're talking about policy changes and specifically when it comes to flood storage, we need to have all-encompassing things and be taking advantage of the federal infrastructure dollars that are coming out of DC, and making sure that we're making long-term investments to address whether it's flooding, heat island effect, you name it.
All right.
I think with creative engineering research, we are capable of building safely and appropriately for our region, including Ward 3. So it really is a matter of if we care to do it or we don't care to do it. Of course, it's not as easily done as it is said. However, we take into consideration when we build for earthquakes, we build for hurricanes, we build for typhoons and tornadoes. We build on fault lines. I mean, Nevada is one of the most fault-ridden states in the nation, and we do know how we can manage these things. We can only build so many stories. So I believe in our flood zone of Ward 3, and I will acknowledge that the others have, that we have done some good work with the new project coming online. However, I think we can do better in review of our codes and policies to see how we are going to regulate the development in these areas. We don't want to ever put anyone at risk. And when someone invests in a home or a business, I mean, their whole savings, their whole lives go into these endeavors. And then you think, what will happen if you do encounter a flood, or you do encounter an earthquake, something like that, a natural disaster. So we can also, I think, be working with our insurance partners, because you know, it's so easy to say, oh, well, you can buy that insurance, but if something happens, then you don't get the insurance money. So I think we can really work with in that regard as well to avert disasters of that nature. But I think with the engineering piece also, looking at irrigation systems, looking at retaining walls, drainage for runoff, capturing water when we do have storms and we do have runoff. How can we do that? How can we be more responsible with recycling, more responsible with green ideas? I think we can handle it. I think we can. We just have to put the effort forward, and we have to hold all of us accountable to creative answers.
Question 4. For some, decisions made by a governing body sometimes create an environment of disillusionment with its constituents. What would you do to repair the broken trust between the community and its representatives?
It's a very important question, and it's a very legitimate concern. on the part of residents of our city. And this is true in any hierarchical model where you have people who are either appointed, elected, or somehow given the authority to make decisions for others. That requires transparency. It requires very, very clear transparency. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to say, I'm telling you about it. It's another thing to say, I'm telling you about it and helping you understand what I mean, or why we have to make the decisions we have to make, or what challenges we are faced with and how we need your input to help us find the proper solution. Because so often we don't have all the answers. Most often we don't have the answers. In fact, probably never do we have all the answers. And so I think it's very important, and this happens in corporations all the time. Courtney mentioned earlier, about the hand across the table reaching to the person. Well, people also need to know that there are leaders who have authority who can make decisions on their behalf, that they're trusted. That's why we're elected or appointed, right, to make decisions, because there's some expertise and that people are putting their trust in us. So I think that, first of all, transparency. There should be nothing to hide. And if there are difficulties, if there are considerations, then those need to be made clear. Because so often decisions are made with all of those things being taken into consideration, right, at a high level. And I think it's possible to be clear and communicate with people without alarming them. That's the other thing too. Then you get that reactionary approach. This is going to be a disaster. It's going to be the end of the world. With my life, so forth and so on. So I really do think, and that with us, it really needs to be a healing process. We're in need of healing.
So I want to start off by, I think, specifically addressing the concern that is being brought up in this question. I will say that the city council made the decision to appoint someone in this process instead of hosting a special election. And I know I've heard from some of the constituents that that is something that they have concerns about. And so I want to make sure that I point that here, and that what I feel is what is being asked in this specific question. So I want to say that the city council had their reasonings, and obviously it would have been difficult to have 2 vacancies in city council if they wouldn't have gone through this process. It would have been a long time. And I don't know if anything could have moved forward or business could have been done in that process. And so just to clarify my own thoughts on this process, but I would say moving forward, I would like to work with the city council members and Madam Mayor to create a more streamlined process for this to ever happen. I know it's unusual for there to be 2 vacancies in city council back to back. But hopefully we can work together as a council to create a system that is transparent, that is accessible, and there for people to view and be a part of, and incorporating the interests of both small businesses in our ward as well as our residents in Ward 3. So I want to make sure I put those 2 things out there for this specific question.
I think this question kind of harkens back to the question we had earlier about building authentic, trusting relationships. And I think first and foremost, as a member of the council, it's important to pick up the phone when you see an agenda item that is going to impact a lot of people, and or you think that people might have a lot of questions about. Doing that work on the front end, I think helps dispel some of this disillusionment in the process, because then you're coming to people before they're surprised or they feel sidelined by a decision or vote that you take on the council. So having the time to be able to commit to making sure you do that work on the front end, I think is very important. Secondly, I think it's also important to be able to explain decisions you make as a member of the council to your residents if they do have questions. And you're never going to please everyone. There's always going to be 2 sides to every issue. But it is your responsibility to be able to be confident in the decisions you are making and be confident in why you chose to do a certain thing. And not afraid to talk to the folks that may disagree with you, even though you might know it might be an uncomfortable conversation. So I think You know, a lot of what I said earlier, I think talks to this question, but those are my two things, picking up the phone, doing the work on the front end, but also being able to explain decisions afterwards if there are still tensions there.
Oh, Kyle, sorry.
That's okay.
Wouldn't be able to do that.
Why don't you go first?
Yeah. Yeah.
I might know Sean has a second response. Last night. Yeah, you know, the disillusionment in the question, I'm trying to think of where that can come from, and Miguel put his finger on, I think, one thing that's kind of this particular moment, this particular process, and I think he spoke about that thoughtfully. At a higher level, I think the disillusionment comes from part of what Courtney was saying, right? If I'm put in this position, there's gonna be a decision I take that you don't like. I'm gonna disappoint you at some point, right? And I have to be able to have that conversation with you. And hopefully I'm showing my work and I'm able to explain why I did that thing. So part of it is just the nature of representative government. There's gonna be stuff that the person put in this position is gonna do that someone's not gonna like. I think another piece of that disillusionment is feeling like that's habitual, or I just don't get it. I don't understand where this process comes from. I don't understand why when I went and I kind of stood and delivered at the city council meeting on this agenda item, and me and 40 of my friends did the same thing, why wasn't that decision implemented? And that's super frustrating. And I think sometimes the answer is there, you know, it's not always that Mr. Smith goes to Washington moment at the final decision point. Sometimes momentum was already in place back at planning, back at permitting, back at some earlier conversation that Courtney referenced that we need to be doing the work picking up the phone. So again, I think reaching out to people and helping do public education about just how this kind of wonky city government thing works is one antidote to that. The other antidote that I see, the other way to rebuild trust and fight that disillusionment is easy wins, right? I maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm overly optimistic about this, but I think sincerely that if I came together with a group of my neighbors and we're just a bunch of schmucks, right? And we decided that we're going to put in a four-way stop in this particular intersection where it's dangerous and we're always seeing close calls. And we navigate that system. We work that all the way through from the initial phone call to it actually gets put in place and that octagon goes up. That's got to feel like a victory. And I think giving people those easy wins and helping empower them to do that is one way to fight that disillusionment.
Great. All right, our final question today. The city of Reno continues to encourage residents to live, work, and play in our community. What are your thoughts on downtown Reno and its relevance to daily life, thriving business development, humanitarian services, and space activation? If you could create a 20-year plan for downtown Reno, what would that entail? So this one is a hefty one. I'm going to give you sort of a second to digest it. Two question marks on that paper, yes.
We have 20 minutes. Yeah, yeah.
20. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start with Kyle.
Lucky me. All right, this is a big question. I'm going to start with kind of a bumper sticker. I think this has been used. I think one of the other applicants, Jamie Chapman, uses the term the biggest little downtown. And so I think, we really do have a lot going on in our downtown, a lot of potential. We've got a river, we've got proximity to the university, we have arts, and those could only get better, right? There's the Lear Theater, there's Pioneer. I don't remember if Brooke is still there. There's a number of arts spots. We have public art throughout our town and beyond. The river is a place to hang out. The river is a place to whitewater raft. So there's a lot of amenities already there that we can just leverage. I spoke a little bit earlier about my nostalgia for kind of the Reno I grew up with and the Reno that my dad grew up with. I would love to see as much of that retained as possible. The row is kind of isolated now as kind of our gaming nexus. And frankly, I kind of like to see that, remain there. It's part of who we are. It's part of what Reno's always been. Obviously, it's been, a while since gaming was, the big force in our economy. I think when I was growing up, it was something like 70% of the economy came from gaming revenue. And I can put sports bets on my phone. I can go to to Native American casinos. That ship has sailed, right? But there's still something there. Those are still fun places to recreate and play in their own way. And they're there, and I think we ought to preserve them. The question also importantly asks about humanitarian services. Just a quick comment. I sputtered out something along these lines last night, but maybe I can be more articulate tonight. In Ward 3, we do have the CARES campus, right? And I think there's a vision to consolidate a lot of the services there, and that's generally speaking a good idea, right? You want the services near the folks that need to access them. We can't just pick up and move Renown or the Hopes campus or St. Mary's. So, there's going to be some need to kind of get folks where they need to go back closer to the downtown, but also make sure that the folks have the services they need there. And then continue to, as that east-north corridor revitalizes, to make sure that the growing things are dealt with.
Ready? All right, Sean. Go ahead.
Well, the Reno that your father envisioned or imagined or lived, I also lived. Just so you know. So I remember when Reno was driving downtown. And everything was downtown. We lived downtown, we shopped downtown. Woolworth was downtown, Gray Reed, Murdoch's, our Dan's, the movie theater, the post office, everything was downtown. And we walked the streets. And we lived and we shopped and we played in downtown Reno. So I think what happens, and this happens with all cities as we grow, right? We decentralize. We decentralize and we go to the suburbs, and part of going to the suburbs is getting away from the problems. And that is going right back to what I said about segregation by design. You get out of there, you don't want to deal with the homeless, you don't want to deal with the poverty, you don't want to deal with the failing infrastructure, and so you move away. What we know now with regentrification, we want to come back, but what happens with regentrification is then you move out, you do another displacement. So I think it's very important that we have a very integrated downtown. That's what makes downtown thrive. But what we have to bring back to downtown is parking, so that we can get to we can get a grocery store downtown. I mean, we want people to live downtown, but we don't give them anywhere to go. And then when they do go there, then there's people shooting up the streets. So that means we have to have law enforcement, we have to have protection. Public safety is super important. I think of the old plazas, in these old Spanish cities, and you have, everything downtown, your churches downtown, and your government buildings downtown, and your post office and your services and your restaurants and cafes. It's possible. I think it's possible to do this, but we have to encourage people to get back on the streets and regain and re-own the street. With the casinos, which I love, I grew up here, I love them all. Everything went up in the air and everything got off the street. So what can we do to work with our casino partners to bring things back down and revitalize our downtown? I think it's possible to do.
Miguel?
I think the downtown Reno area, when you think of Reno and the skyline, that's the casinos and the other businesses that are there are a huge component of that. So the image of our identity and who we are, I think is tied to the downtown area. And although the casinos may not play as big an economic role as they did in the past, downtown area is still a diverse business place to run business, to live, to have a community. And so what I'm envisioning is hopefully a downtown that isn't just a tourist destination, but something that feels more like a community where people can live, work, and play and feel safe in that environment. And that they're able to thrive, as one of the other applicants keep mentioning. I really like that word, to thrive and be successful. So hopefully we can get it to that particular place. In terms of the 20-year plan for downtown Reno, I think I would have to work with the Ward 1 representative, if I'm correct, or the other council members, to be able to understand the complexities of what's going on in downtown Reno, and be able to make an informed decision about that 20-year plan, and making sure, like I said, we're making a place that is diverse for our community, that has different places to live, to work, and to play. And it isn't just a tourist destination, but it's more that we can all enjoy as a community.
I think we've done so far a pretty good job of incorporating a ton of different aspects of community spaces into our downtown corridor. I mean, being a daughter of blackjack dealers and the granddaughter of a pit boss, I do have a deep appreciation of our gaming community, and they are the center economic driver of our downtown community. I think when we're thinking about a 20-year plan for downtown, I would like to make sure that our community spaces continue to remain inclusive to all residents of the city. That means making sure that our art programs are accessible, our parks are accessible. Whether you're unsheltered or you live in a adjacent neighborhood, you should have spaces for you to live, work, and play in our community, specifically downtown. I think a big recent topic we've been addressing as a city or contemplating is the micromobility study in the downtown corridor, what we can do to make it more pedestrian friendly, whether that's creating one-way streets, creating more bike lanes for residents and tourists alike. Just to make it more of a community space. So it doesn't feel so sometimes transit oriented. I mean, obviously we have a lot of main arteries and corridors that serve our public transportation services that run through downtown. And so I would look forward to working with the city council to continue trying new things to incorporate all of those great spaces. So you can get from Idlewild Park all the way down to the up and coming 4th Street revitalization and brewery district. And feel that, you know, it's a space that you are welcome and everyone can enjoy equally.
All right, so we've gone through our series of questions tonight. So we will just wrap with some closing thoughts or a closing statement from each of you. And once Donnie has our 1-minute timer up. Speak as quickly as possible. We only have 60 seconds. All right, Courtney, we'll go ahead and start.
First of all, thank you all again for being here this evening. It really means a lot to see so many people engaged in this process, even though it's a condensed timeline. And obviously it's been important for all of us to hear your input as well. So I look forward to our conversation. I think, you know, having this opportunity would be an honor of a lifetime to continue serving my state and our region as a member of the city council. I believe I bring great experience from a state perspective, a regional perspective, to be able to take the job on day one and get to work. And I think also being a full-time city council person, which I would be, is important to addressing some of the issues in terms of authenticity, disillusionment with the process, and beginning to repair those relationships across Ward 3. So I look forward to speaking with you all afterwards, and thanks again for being here.
I echo Courtney's thanks. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the city for making this possible. Some years ago, I was given a very special honor in my life, and it's the Reno People Award. And I hold that very dear to me. And I would like to suggest that I extend that special honor into service and help the people of Reno and the people of Ward 3. There are a few things I wanted to say. I'm the only person here who lives in downtown. So I not only envision it for others, I envision it for myself. And I really do believe in our downtown. I'd like to see perhaps maybe a core district, so that we're all working in one effort. I think the biggest thing is that constituent services are key. Responsiveness is key. Commitment to tracking down your issues is key. And I commit myself to showing up every day and representing every man, every woman, every child, everyone who has an interest in the safety, security, and peace of our city. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo the thanks for everyone for being here. Thanks for the writers of these questions, even the humdingers. And yeah, it was a great conversation so far, and I look forward to having more when we finish. I'm just going to rattle through a couple of things that I didn't find a space for. One is, you know, I'm a bicyclist. I get around mostly by bicycle. So we talk about micromobility and making our streets safe for all users. That includes people with mobility issues, children, people who are walking. Those are issues that are near and dear to my heart in my livelihood, and making sure I get home to my boys every night. So I'd be happy to talk with you further about that. Another thing that I think some of the other finalists have mentioned in terms of being accessible and available. I mentioned I have a small law practice. I just want to, this came up a little bit last night, and when I reassure folks, I'm fortunate to be in a position to be able to scale back my law practice. And so among those three things, I'd be balancing my counsel role, my family, and my law practice. The latter, the law practice, is the one that would be able to contract to make sure that I'm as available as I have promised to be. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to more conversations.
All right, go.
Les quiero dar gracias de todo corazón por haber venido hoy para conocernos un poco más. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and learning a little bit more about our stories, our vision for the ward, how we would represent you as citizens of this area. And one thing that I also wanted to mention, and I didn't have the opportunity to, is that I am a father and a homeowner in the area. I'm raising two strong, beautiful, young daughters, and I hope to provide them with a sustainable city, a safe city that they can grow up in, that they can thrive in, that they can become active citizens in. And so, as I mentioned earlier, some of my key positions or what I would be interested in getting involved with the most would be housing, public safety, and parks and recreation centers. So I look forward to continuing the conversation with you all. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at any point. I'd be happy to sit down and have a coffee or just meet and chat about whatever issue you are facing. Thank you.
All right. So that will conclude our question and answer time tonight. Again, both of the recordings last night and tonight will be available on reno.gov tomorrow morning once I get them downloaded and back onto the website. So if you missed either session, please be sure to follow up and get connected that way. Additionally, if you have any questions about this process, feel free to contact my office, the Reno City Clerk's office, and we're happy to walk through any questions or issues that you may have had. Our next stages in this is that these four individuals will meet with the Reno City Council on October 26th, where they will be interviewed individually. And hopefully I will have a new boss on that day, and we will be making an appointment to this body, and that will happen on the 26th. So best of luck to each of you. And to those on Zoom, thank you for joining us, and we will see you on the 26th.
Thanks, everyone.
Are we mingling?
We are like get out there.
I need to look up the seats.
Yeah, thank you.
David. You were there last night at the.
I took care of